From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. Our top story tonight is about the surge in COVID cases in the United States. Dr. Fauci says that the Delta variant doubling in the United States every 2 weeks is the greatest threat to eradicating COVID. Chicago officials issued a travel advisory yesterday for the state of Arkansas and Missouri. Unvaccinated visitors to Chicago from these states are urged to quarantine for 10 days. The highly contagious Delta variant that was first identified in India has now spread in more than 90 other countries. It has also become the dominant variant in the United States. Half of the Indonesian capital of Jakarta is already sick with COVID's Delta variant as the whole country is in lockdown. Meanwhile, Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is calling on the U.S. to produce more vaccines for the world. She warned that if the country does not, the pandemic could drag on for generations. A detailed analysis on the rise of COVID-19 cases is coming up later in our show, so keep watching Muslim News. United States President Joe Biden decried Republican attacks on voting rights yesterday by asking the party's members, "Have you no shame?" He also called the fight for voting rights the test of our time. Biden said that the Republican-led push to tighten voting rules is an unfolding assault on liberty. But Republicans say that they want to guarantee that Americans can have confidence that votes are counted fairly. President Biden contended that the 28 laws already adopted in 17 states make it harder for Americans to vote. He called the laws election subversion. The president, however, did not mention the filibuster in his speech, which is the main hurdle in getting the voting rights bill passed. Meanwhile, Texas Governor Greg Abbott vowed to arrest Democrats who fled Texas to block voting restrictions over the last few days. Lawmakers flew to Washington, D.C. to deny the Texas legislature a quorum. Governor Abbott says he will call special sessions indefinitely. GOP senators are fighting to preserve President Biden's war powers amid tensions with Iran. While not supporting President Biden's plea on voting reform, Republicans want him to retain powers to bomb other countries without congressional approval. 20 years ago, Congress granted the president this power in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. President Biden had said he wants to hand the reins of expanded military authority back to the U.S. Congress. Dr. Cornel West, who earlier this year gave up his drive for tenure at the Harvard Divinity School, is leaving the university. He'll be joining the faculty at the Union Theological Seminary in Virginia. West is one of the nation's foremost Black scholars and an outspoken progressive activist. He announced his resignation from Harvard this week, accusing the school of intellectual and spiritual bankruptcy of deep debts. West also suggested in his resignation letter that politics were why Harvard did not extend tenure to him, citing his outspoken support for the Palestinian cause. Professor West's battle over tenure echoes another involving high-profile Black scholar Nicole Hannah Jones. Jones was denied tenure at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. The school later granted her a position at the journalism school with tenure. She declined and is now joining the faculty at Howard University, a historically Black college. Hannah Jones is the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist behind the New York Times 1619 Project. A survey of Jewish American voters taken after the latest round of Israeli oppression on Gazans in May and June finds that a sizable minority believes some of the harshest criticisms of Israel. This includes that Israel is committing genocide and apartheid against Palestinians. 25% of American Jews agree with the statement that Israel is an apartheid state. That includes 38% of those under the age of 40. 61% support the two-state solution to the conflict, according to the poll. And 62% support U.S. President Joe Biden's move this spring to restore American financial aid to Palestinians. This was cut by Donald Trump. The survey of 800 voters was conducted by GBAO Strategies from June 28th to July 1st, online and via text. In international news today, Kashmiris marked July 13th as Martyrs' Day, in the memory of the first Kashmiri uprising 90 years ago on July 13th, 1931. The Indian government, however, no longer allows marking this anniversary. It barred Kashmiri leaders from visiting graveyards on Martyrs' Day. This is the second consecutive year that events relating to the occasion have been stopped. Before the scrapping of Article 370 2 years ago, official ceremonies were allowed. Kashmiri diaspora communities in different countries continue to commemorate Martyrs' Day. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, while marking the day, said Pakistan stands with Kashmir. In related news, the Indian military claims it has killed 3 militants in Kashmir's Pulwama district. It is after 7 locations were raided in the Kashmiri Valley this week. An elderly Kashmiri woman was crushed to death after being run over by an army truck in northern Kashmir's Bandipora district. The Indian government-appointed Kashmir administration also dismissed 11 government employees over alleged terror links. Residents of the city of Manchester in the United Kingdom are showing solidarity with soccer player Marcus Rashford. His defaced mural has become a rallying point. It was defaced with racist abuse following his penalty miss in the final game of Euro 2020 on Sunday, in which England lost to Italy. Rashford was one of the 3 black players targeted by racists online over the team's defeat.
I'm a Mancunian, born and bred, proud to be a Mancunian, and I'm just so proud of what Marcus Rashford's done for this country. I'm just ashamed and disgusted at the behaviour of the people after Sunday night and the racist comments they put towards him and his fellow colleagues, and just wanted to come and show my support and feel part of the local community and just say thank you to him for what he's done, and he should be proud of himself.
Rashford's England teammate Tyrone Mings criticized Home Secretary Priti Patel. He said she had stoked the fire by defending fans who had booed players taking the knee before the games. Patel had previously said that taking the knee was gesture politics. Grief and anger gripped the southern Iraqi city of Nasiriyah on Tuesday. This was after fire swept through a temporary COVID isolation unit at Al Hussein Hospital, killing 92 people. It was fueled by oxygen canisters exploding. This was the second such tragedy in Iraq in 3 months. The blaze injured 100 people. News agency AFP reports that as the first funerals were held, angry protesters blamed provincial authorities for the deaths. Hundreds of young protesters shut down private hospitals in Nasiriyah. This was to pressure the authorities to open the doors of a newly built public hospital in the city. In a tweet on Tuesday, President Barham Saleh blamed the catastrophe on persistent corruption and mismanagement that undervalues the lives of Iraqis. The Amazon-owned Ring service is changing how police can access homeowners' camera footage. Ring doorbell cameras installed in homes provide valuable video feeds to track crimes in neighborhoods. Local police have been able to easily access this database. Ring has now announced that it will change the way police can request this video footage. Police will now have to post their request in Ring's Neighbors app. Homeowners will then have a choice to respond to the request for assistance or opt out. This will allow them to protect their privacy if they so choose. Users will be able to see every digital request a police department has made to the residents for Ring footage. This change also increases transparency and determines how police use or abuse their access to this information. The Electronic Frontier Foundation found that Los Angeles police targeted Black Lives Matter protests last year with bulk Ring requests. This was for doorbell camera footage that likely included First Amendment protected activities. Many Indians leave their home country to feed their families back home. But sometimes things turn into a tragedy. Ali Khalaf and Saliha Farouk have the story on Indian farmers exploited in Italy.
When Balbir Singh refers to his ordeal, he uses the Italian word macello. This word roughly translates as mess. Balbir, however, does not know enough Italian to convey what this Indian farm worker has endured. For 6 years, he lived in what can only be described as slave-like conditions. Balbir tends to the cattle and lives in the province of Latina, a rural area in the south of Rome. It is home to tens of thousands of Indian migrant workers just like him.
I was working 12 to 13 hours per day, including Sundays, with no holidays, no rest even on Christmas. And he, the farm owner N, paid me 150 euros per month.
This is less than 50 cents an hour. The legal minimum for farm workers is around 10 euros an hour. Singh was rescued by a police raid on March 17, 2017, after appealing for help via Facebook and WhatsApp. Officers found him living in a caravan with no gas, hot water, or electricity. He was eating the leftovers that his boss either threw in the bin or gave to chickens and pigs. Singh had to wash in the stables with the same hose pipe he used to clean the cattle. He was also instructed that he could not complain.
When I found a lawyer ready to help me, the owner N told me, "I'll kill you. I'll dig up a hole, throw you in it, and fill it up, because you are nothing."
The UN's Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery estimated in 2018 that more than 400,000 agricultural workers in Italy risk being exploited.
Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment on Kashmir. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Today we have with us Dr. Imtiaz Khan, who's a professor at the George Washington University Medical Center and a board member of World Kashmiri Association. He was in New York recently, gathered to commemorate the martyrdom of 21 innocent Kashmiris on July 13, 1931. This marks Kashmir Martyr Day. Thank you so much, Dr. Khan, for being with us today.
Welcome.
Dr. Khan, could you share with us the history of Kashmir Martyr Day?
Yeah, actually, as far as the history goes, it was that Kashmir was under a despotic ruler, Maharaja Hari Singh, and it was a tragedy that his forefathers had got Kashmiris from Britishers who had sold the area for 50,000 rupees, 50 lakh rupees. And they had been ruling Kashmir ruthlessly, basically forced labor, and people had no rights. And in year 1931, Abdul Qadir Khan raised his voice against the Maharaja, and he was put into the jail. And when his trial in Jammu Kashmir court was going on, there were Kashmiris who protested against his arrest. And they were fired at a point blank range by the troops of the Maharaja. And in the melee, 21 to 24 people were massacred, and they were buried in the nearby graveyard. And since that time, Kashmiris have been observing this Martyrs' Day every year on July 13th.
So now this, for the past 2 years, Kashmiris in Kashmir have not been allowed to celebrate this day or mark this day. What has the diaspora done to keep this day alive?
Well, as you say that Kashmir is under central rule, the BJP, the communal RSS, their plan is the anti-Muslim agenda and integrating Jammu Kashmir forcibly with the rest of India and converting the Muslim majority into minority. Kashmiris in the diaspora, basically what we did this year also, there are rallies held all over the world. We had a rally about a few days on last Sunday in New York. There were rallies in London and other parts of the Europe. There are lots of webinars and basically reminding the people about the sacrifices made by these people. And not only of these people now since you have to remember that since 1990, 130,000 Kashmiri youth have been martyred by Indian forces. Mm-hmm. So basically, because no political activity is allowed in Kashmir, there are no room for demonstrations or people to express their point of view. So the people in the diaspora are trying their best to commemorate the occasion and remind people about the sacrifices made by these people.
Now, Shahada in Muslim lexicon is a really high status, and martyr, this means martyrs in English. So can you tell me what Kashmiri culture is like in regards to Kashmiri martyrs?
Well, as far as the Kashmiri, it is just like any Muslim population that martyrs go to. Basically, they sacrifice their lives in the path of Allah, in the path of the freedom, and they have to be remembered, and they get a special place in paradise. And they have to be commemorated every year, and tributes have to be paid against them, and we have to remember their families, pay tributes to them, the kind of sacrifices they have undergone. Like recently in 2016, Burhan Wani was martyred, and as it has been told many times, the Indian government imposed dusk to dawn curfew, but in spite of that, 300,000 people walked on foot and attended his. Like every year, we have anniversary of Burhan Wani's martyrdom. So it is basically Allah is pleased with them. They have a special place in paradise, and they have contributed their life for the sake of the noble cause.
Dr. Imtiaz, could you share with us the latest updates on the situation in Kashmir?
Well, the situation is pretty bad. Actually, as you know, since August 5, 2019, when Article 370 was abrogated and 35A was abolished, there were about 15 to 20,000 youth who were taken outside the valley in different jails of India in a most pathetic conditions. The Kashmir has been turned into basically a concentration camp. People cannot move out. There are about 1 million paramilitary forces in Kashmir. And like I said, it is a concentration camp. And in earlier days, when they would catch some youth under the pretext that he's a militant, they would kill him or destroy his house. Nowadays, what they do, they surround the area and under least any pretext, or suspicion, what they do, they demolish the whole locality and kill any youth they can lay their hands on. They're basically trying to change the demographic character of Kashmir. They are trying to introduce this demarcation of the boundaries so that the Muslim majority state will lose the character. It will become Hindu majority, and so that they can impose any laws, because every day new laws are imposed about which even Kashmiris don't know about. They are trying to usurp the land. Now the government or the army can take over any land under the pretext, or any house, that it is important for security reasons. Every day you have, yesterday, about 4 to 5 innocent people were martyred. Now we are talking about like the incident in Palestine where 250 people were killed by Israeli forces. But at least the world came to know about it. There were pictures of these young children on New York Times. If you look at it, Indians have murdered hundreds and up to thousands of people since January 1 on day-to-day basis, but nobody is paying attention. 8 to 10 employees who were dismissed from their services on the excuse that they were indulging in anti-national activities. And not only that, now they will be prosecuted for being sort of anti-Indian, which they have not done anything. It is just to harass the population.
Now, you made this point about there's a lot of support for Palestine, but people have sort of the support for the Kashmir cause has waned over the past year, especially because of the pandemic. We had seen a slew of protests around the world for Kashmir by allies as well, but this has waned over the past year. What do you suggest? How can activists bring the focus back on Kashmir?
By arranging these conferences like these, by approaching Muslim countries, by approaching Europe, feeding with the everyday information. Why doesn't the information go there? There are people being killed. There are lands being usurped. There are numerous incidents of properties being devastated. That's why organizations like yours, other organizations, in spite of the pandemic, have to keep people informed that under the pretext of COVID, actually India is using it as a pretext. They are imposing those laws thinking that the world attention is directed towards the pandemic. So that is a challenge for us. That is the challenge for human rights activists, that will they allow India to use pandemic as an excuse to implement their nefarious designs? This is a challenge for people like me, people like you, that how can we keep the world informed about the atrocities which are being inflicted on the people of Kashmir? Because if this thing is allowed to continue unabated, after very few years, Kashmir will not exist in present form. It will be area inhabited by Hindu majority population. They are trying to get in RSS goons who are very well armed. The plan is to kill and subjugate further the local population and basically change the demographic character of the region.
Now, you had mentioned the pandemic and COVID being used. There's going to be a sacred pilgrimage, a Hindu pilgrimage taking place, the Amarnath pilgrimage that will take place in the coming up months. What has the Indian government done to protect Kashmiris from the onslaught of people coming in from the mainland, especially as the Delta variant is spreading and has killed hundreds and thousands of people in mainland India?
That is the policy. That's what India wants. It wants to harass Kashmir, damage Kashmiris as much as they can. It is not the question of only pilgrim. There are, as I said, 1 million paramilitary forces. They are being constantly replaced by others and taken in and out of Kashmir. They are tourists from Uttar Pradesh, where the pandemic was so severe that the bodies were thrown in the river. They allowed them to come India. come to Kashmir. So it is not that there are not enough vaccinations in Kashmir. India wants that pandemic should spread in Kashmir as much as possible, because they will use any tool to damage Kashmiri people, to hurt Kashmiri people. And it is being done intentionally to allow these yatris, like they allowed this Kumbh Mela in India. That was one of the major cause of the spread of virus in India, because in that it flared up. As a matter of fact, not distracting from the real issue, Narendra Modi should be prosecuted for crimes against humanity, because he allowed those pilgrims to gather and take a dip in the holy water, and they spread, and this variant Delta voice from there event to other countries also. So they are not stopping anybody to come to Kashmir. The tourists are going there unchecked, and they are spreading this virus. Is India concerned about? Not at all. As a matter of fact, it is facilitating the spread of pandemic in the Kashmir Valley.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This was Dr. Imtiaz Khan speaking about the use of the pandemic to cause more martyrs in Kashmir. Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Earlier in our show, we shared the news of rising COVID-19 cases in the US. To learn more about the devastation caused by the Delta variant of the virus, let's go to Imam Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. COVID cases are rising again. And I'm in Chicago. Chicago has issued a travel advisory for people from Arkansas and Missouri that they cannot come in, otherwise they will have to quarantine. I don't know if that could be done. To discuss what's happening right now, we have a professor, Dr. Christopher Martin. Welcome to Muslim Network.
Thank you, Imam. It's good to be here again on your show.
Professor Martin is at the School of Public Health at the West Virginia University. So what is happening? I mean, cases have doubled in last 2 weeks. Actually, New York Times have been reporting for almost a week that it is doubling. And is another wave coming?
Well, we don't yet know, Imam. I would caution the viewers, when you hear doubling, you can become alarmed. But part of that reflects the success of the vaccines in greatly reducing the number of new cases. So it's a doubling, but of much smaller numbers than we were dealing with several months ago. It's not yet clear if this will be another wave. We certainly hope it will not. But the factors behind this recent uptake are clearly the emergence of the variants, particularly the Delta variant, that is now considered to be the dominant strain in the United States. We know that these variants have a property that makes them more contagious, if you will. They're more transmissible. And this is something that the virus will want to do. If you think in the mind of a virus, of course, they don't have a brain, but what the virus wants to do is make as much of itself as it possibly can. And so when these viruses randomly mutate, which they do routinely, any virus that develops that is able to be more contagious and spread more rapidly is at a distinct advantage. So these variants are outpacing our ability to vaccinate the population, which is what we're seeing now with this recent uptake in cases.
You know, considering that Delta virus was originally established itself in India, and now it's going around, I mean, it has reached almost 90 countries. So what are the lessons from India which could be learned? I mean, considering that, not many people are happy that they dealt it properly. Are we properly ready to deal with it?
Well, in the United States, the problem, of course, that we have, which is not unique to this country, is a problem with acceptance and uptake of the vaccine. And that is the major problem. The great tragedy in the United States is that we have now widely available vaccinations to the COVID, but reluctance or obstacles for people to take those up. So the lesson of India is that when you do not control the virus anywhere in the world, that affords the virus greater opportunities to mutate, as I described just previously, and to create these new variants. So uncontrolled spread of the virus anywhere in the world is a threat to the people of the United States. And this is why we keep emphasizing that efforts to immunize the entire population, even in distant lands like India, are in our own self-interest. It is, of course, altruistically and morally the right thing to do. But in addition, it's in our own self-interest, because until we get this virus suppressed globally, we remain at risk, every single one of us.
Reports are also saying that in Indonesia, the fourth largest country in the world, almost half of the city of Jakarta population is sick because of this. So, your message that unless everyone is vaccinated and we have gotten rid of the virus itself, nobody is safe. In this view, a New York Congresswoman AOC is asking United States to produce vaccine in the massive quantities to share with the rest of the world. Otherwise, this thing might be with us for a generation.
Well, absolutely. And that is why such plans are advisable from a public health perspective. Because again, anywhere that it circulates in the world is enormously connected now. You see that again and again. Look at how quickly the variants spread throughout the countries. That speaks to the speed of transmission of infectious diseases in our current day globe. And so until we suppress this, we're all at risk. Now, we have to make two distinctions here, because you use the term getting rid of this virus forever. Most people don't think that that's a viable option. That would be what we would call eradication. And unfortunately, it does not seem possible that we're going to eradicate this virus. But what we could do is achieve a more modest goal of what is referred to as elimination, which is in defined regions have no new cases for prolonged periods of time. And that has been achieved for COVID. New Zealand has done that. Vietnam has done that. And so we have to hope that we can get to a stage where this virus is suppressed such that many parts of the world have eliminated it and it circulates in much smaller numbers. If we can do that, then we're going to see fewer variants emerge and all of us be more safe in the future.
You know, Ontario, a couple of days ago, achieved 0 death on this. In Canada, the largest province of Canada, And just a couple of months ago, they were all complete lockdown, just in our neighborhood. Is it possible Chicago, for example, as I mentioned, has said that people from Arkansas and Missouri cannot come in, or people cannot go, travel advisory. I don't know how they're going to implement this thing because these two states have 35 or 40% vaccination rate. And now in the state of Missouri, or I think it's state of Missouri, or is it the state of Tennessee? Somebody, the person in charge of vaccination have resigned, essentially forced out. So this struggle within our country, do you think cities going to go on locking down cities instead of the statewide situation?
Well, as you know, I'm a Canadian who's lived in the United States now and become American for 22 years. So I'm familiar with both countries. And of course, every country and societies vary in terms of their acceptance of these type of efforts, lockdown measures, et cetera. And of course, you've seen in China with a very strong government response that was possible in a country like China. You see this variation. So we know that lockdowns work, but of course we have to respect people's civil liberties and rights, et cetera. And any of these measures are only going to be as successful as they are to the extent with which they're embraced by every individual within that population. So do I see lockdowns in the United States in the future? Not in the immediate future, no. Barring a additional wave with very significant public health burdens, which I think at this point is unlikely because of the vaccinations. But barring that, I don't see anything beyond the type of travel restrictions, which admittedly are very difficult to enforce within a country. I also would envision international travel restrictions, but I don't see us returning to broader lockdowns, at least in the United States, in the near future. I don't see the political will to do that. And I don't see the population supporting those without seeing a resurgence of the virus before their eyes. And we are certainly not there yet.
Well, I hope so, but masks are all gone. Should we still keep them some easy access or forget about it? I mean, I see on the sidewalk commuting, people have thrown them on left and right on the street.
Right. Well, unfortunately, many of these measures have become associated with politics. And that's most unfortunate because this is really about health and well-being. And if it was kept in people's minds as a health measure, as a public health measure, and not associated with political beliefs, not associated with politicians, I think we would have had much greater support. Unfortunately, that's not been the experience, certainly in the United States. It's important for your viewers to recommend that if they are vaccinated, and the single most important message I can give is the vaccines are safe and the vaccines are effective. And the current problems that we're seeing are in unvaccinated people. Again, additional strong evidence of the need to get vaccinated. If you yourself are vaccinated, you are protected. The problem is, of course, the vaccine is not yet available to pediatric populations. There are some people by choice or because of obstacles remain unvaccinated. And so mask use, especially among the unvaccinated or in situations where there's an anticipation of greater risk of transmission, such as indoor environments with high density, the recommendation continues to be that mask wearing is recommended. And I'll also point out, I've traveled to East Asia many times. And decades ago, when I was in East Asia, you would routinely see people wearing masks. So I anticipate that some people are going to choose to wear masks indefinitely. It's also worth remembering that we had essentially no influenza this season, again, because the measures, including mask wearing, were protective for other viruses as well. And I know my wife has said, I think when flu season is coming around, I'm going to be generally wearing a mask. So people always have that option available to them.
Yeah, and N95, which was hard to find anywhere, are available easily now. So
that's right.
Stock it up.
Correct.
So tell me, what is the situation in West Virginia where you are? What percentage of the population is vaccinated now?
Well, I think we're pretty much typical for the nation as a whole. We, as you know, and the first time I was on your show, I was speaking about our very, very early success where we were a world leader. Unfortunately, then we, as I worried about and predicted, we encountered the vaccine resistance and hesitancy that is very pervasive in our population. And so our governor has followed the lottery approach. And so we have a state lottery. The recent winners were, actually, I think we'll have the additional winners announced today. Doesn't appear that this has had the success that other states believe they're having, such as Ohio, to try and increase vaccine uptake. Again, many of the predictors of vaccine resistance and hesitancy you would predict that West Virginia would be higher than national averages. And so unfortunately, we got off to a great start, but then have lagged behind and are now fairly typical for the United States as a whole, and can't seem to find ways to get those final percent vaccinated. Even somewhat discouragingly, my university is reporting vaccination rates in the low 40%. Of people who work at our university, which I must say I do find discouraging.
Well, Professor, as a professor, you need to do your preaching there.
Yes, and it's a very difficult area. I would say that I've learned a lot about how I and my colleagues can do a much better job communicating more effectively about vaccines. It's much more complicated than I appreciated, and there's much more to it than simply providing data. Trust is absolutely essential in effective communication to overcome people's concerns about vaccines.
Well, thank you so much. Truly appreciate you being with us once again.
My pleasure, Imam, and I look forward to my next appearance on your show in the future, inshallah.
Absolutely. Take care.
You too.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube and Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.